Welcome to the presentation again. And this time we are like 3 minutes late. I'll just give it through real quick because I think 1/3 of you missed the beginning. So my name is Joonas Lehtinen, I'm the founder of Vaadin. We are going to be covering a short intro to Vaadin, write a hello world type of application, explain what's new in Vaadin 7, kind of discuss what's the relationship between GWT and Vaadin, and I hope in the end you have many questions. Or actually you had already some, but maybe you have time for extra questions in the end as well. Vaadin is a Finnish word meaning female reindeer. I guess at least 6% of you knew that already. But at the end of the day, it's a web framework for building rich web applications. Basically being a bunch of UI components that you can use to combine and build your applications out of. Our optimization target is a bit different than GWT, so we are optimizing for the developer productivity. We want that your applications have as few code lines as possible, they have as few classes as possible, they are as easy to maintain as possible. And at the same time, we want you to have really rich user experience. This is a different optimization target than GWT. GWT optimizes for speed, scalability. So they do some compromises on this end, we do some compromises on the scalability end, and let's discuss later on how it actually goes. Our approach is basically hide HTML platform behind Java. And let's start again from the key ideas in Vaadin. It's really strange speaking the same presentation again. So, components. And we already know that the demo server is not working locally here, so we can use online demos. So let's see demo. Sampler. So this is basically like kitchen sink application for Vaadin. You can kind of see what are the new features in Vaadin. You can try these out. Let's say you want to kind of hear about how the server push in Vaadin works, and you can start testing it right away over here. So let's see. I'll just want to kind of send events on mouse move, and I want to use push channel. So what's happening over there is that I'm having a server-side clock thread on the server. This is shared to all the users. I don't know who is user 32 and 29, maybe some of you. And basically what I'm doing is when I'm kind of moving mouse over here, I'm sending events to the server side and distributing these to all the users of the same application. So if one of you is moving your mouse over here, I would be seeing a cursor moving around. Thank you, user 32. You can basically kind of try out how responsive this is when you are sending mouse moves back and forth. And you actually see over here that when it's communicating to the server and back. But actually I wanted to show you UI components, not this demo. So let's go to UI components and let's take, let's say, data input component, date field component, and the idea is that you can kind of go through all the different components and try them out yourself. So let's kind of choose a date and see how our demo behaves. We are just showing the date over here in the bottom. And we can take a look at the source code and see how this is implemented, so we can kind of learn from the demo. We can start modifying the component. Let's say we want to show weak numbers over there. I don't see any weak numbers. Okay. Could we do something else? We could put that invisible. Okay, it vanishes. We could put this like enabled or disabled, so we can kind of try out how the different features work. Oh, in this case it doesn't work. It seems that the weak number is not showing properly. And we can try different components, basically component by component, try these out. But what I wanted to show you was a real application example or a real demo. It's more kind of, because Vaadin is typically used for building applications that resemble desktop applications, something that kind of take all the space on the screen and that has a login and has like a lot of components on the screen at the same time. So it's quite typical to have applications like this where you have graphs and you have a lot of data. So this is like, I would say, typical boring business application. You have a lot of data on the screen and people are using multiple hours a day when they're using that. But things like lazy loading data from the server side, they are totally automated because this application over there is written fully in Java on the server side. And when we are on the server side, we can access the backend data sources really easy. We don't have to think about how we are doing the communication between the client and the server. This is automatically done to you by Vaadin. And you can still do pretty rich stuff like you could, let's say, build a report editor where you would be like drag and dropping things around, or do like rich layouting for building calendars and so forth. The exact same application will be working on mobile as well. So for example, in this case, this is the same application run on iPad. And the key thing to remember is that while all the components work on mobile as well, while they support touch events for things like drag and drop, it might not be a good idea to run the same application on the mobile. I mean, running this on iPad is totally fine. Running this on iPhone is a bad idea. So if you want to build an application that supports mobile well in Vaadin, you should start thinking about the layouts. Luckily there are responsive layouts built into Vaadin, and there is actually a workshop this afternoon that is discussing how to build responsive UIs in Vaadin, how to build themes in Vaadin. So if you are interested about building responsive UIs, this is a workshop that you might take a look at. It's actually not that one specific, so there are also, it should have a lot of content for non-Vaadin developers as well. We also have a specialized mobile specific widget set that kind of provides native look and feel for Vaadin. And we support basically all the browsers out there. It's a bit outdated slide. We of course support Windows 8 and VP8 as well. Today, the Vaadin, we have currently two supported Vaadin versions out, Vaadin 6 and Vaadin 7. Vaadin 6 is still supporting even IE 6 and IE 7. Vaadin 7 supports anything beginning from IE 8 and all the modern browsers, of course. So basically, all these components, they kind of take the trouble of supporting different browsers away from your hands and guarantee that these components work on all these mobile browsers. There is also a really active user community around Vaadin. Today we have a bit over 400 add-on components. Actually it was 400 last week. I think we had an add-on workshop yesterday over here, so it might be a bit over 400 if the guys got something done. There is actually a really active community around Vaadin, and these guys are building new components, both UI components, data sources, themes and so forth. And this is actually pretty exciting. You just choose a component over there, you get a short introduction, what it does, you can take a look of the screenshot, and for example in this case, this is a totally ridiculous component, and it's a good example why you shouldn't have all the components in your framework. This is a layouting component that lays out your components on a sticky notes in a way that these are on top of each other, and then you can kind of grab the corner of a sticky note and start kind of peeking under these. But if you happen to want this kind of component in your application, what you do is you take a look of the code example how to use it. You take a look of the POM definition and cut and paste this POM definition to your Maven POM file, and it automatically gets integrated to your application. Or if you hate Maven, you can just download the jar file and drop that into your project, and it gets integrated as well. Themes. this is the current default theme in Vaadin. It's, I would say, a bit modest or boring business-like theme. You already saw in the keynote what we are working on at the moment, like really, really flexible and modifiable theme. But in the package there are few themes built in, like this, and a bit more modern, like rounded theme, a kind of editable theme where you can pick the colors. This is not nearly as flexible than the theme that we are working on at the moment. And of course you can go totally crazy and actually build custom themes that look whatever you want our component to look like. So these are just standard components, a bit of CSS on top of these, and it looks like iTunes. Data sources. All of the UI components in Vaadin have two ways of dealing with data. Either you can set the data into the component, let's say you have text field, you say set value for the text field component and the text is over there. Or you can say text field set data source and bind this to an external data source. The data model is such that we have three different things. We have properties. Properties is basically just one value. Then we have items. These are like a collection of these values, named collection of these values, and then we have a container that is basically a collection of these items. So table clearly it connects to a container. Text field clearly connects to a property. Form would connect to an item, and so forth. And these are just interfaces. They are pretty easy to implement yourself. So if you want to connect to your backend data, just implement these. There are some kind of extra interfaces that you can implement if you want to have like more detail, but you are not forced to do so. There are also plenty of implementations built into Vaadin and also that can be found in Vaadin directory. So in most cases you don't have to actually build the implementation yourself. You can just use some of the existing ones. So the second thing, and I think the most interesting thing to GUI developers is that how we are combining the client side and the server side in Vaadin. So if you think about the web application, any kind of web application, you have these layers. You have backend, you have web server, you have UI written in JavaScript, at least eventually written in JavaScript, and you have a communication channel in between those. And you have to implement all of these. So when you're building in JavaScript, you have to implement 4 layers. When you're building GUI, you have to implement 4 layers. You can use Java instead of JavaScript. And then you can use Disney to actually write JavaScript as well. Vaadin is a bit different. In Vaadin, you are only required to write the backend layers. Rest are optional. So you write the backend server layer, you write the UI on the server side. And all of the communication and all the JavaScripts are automatically generated for you. So if you compare these and forget the backend layer, you are actually having a situation where you are comparing 1 layer to 3 layers. So if your application is having only 1 layer for the UI, that is clearly quite a bit less than having 3 layers for the UI. In practice, this is kind of shown by having less code lines, having less development time, having less maintenance time. And the compromise being you have less control over what's happening in your application. You don't have control over when the communication happens. You don't have control over what exactly the DOM is. So that's a compromise. So let's take a simple example. This is just a crowd view having a table on the beginning and some editors in the end. This is actually just a mock-up. So if you would be implementing this thing in server-side Vaadin, on top of the backend layer over here, we would have only 1 UI component. And that's it. So it's around 150 lines of Java code, and it implements all of this UI. To implement the same thing in GUI, you basically have the same component here on the client side. It looks really much the same. The only difference being that the widgets in Vaadin, they have quite a bit more power than the stock widgets in GUI. For example, you saw how the grid widget worked in Arthur's demo. Having 3 lines of code, you actually can show lazily loaded data on the screen. To do the same thing in plain GUID, you would have quite a bit of boilerplate code. But the interesting thing over there is that when your UI is on the client side, you have to have some kind of communication channel as well. And you have to implement the service layer as well. So basically you're exposing services like add an address, fetch a list of addresses to net. And you have to implement these, and you have to define a certain kind of communication protocol for passing data back and forth. So altogether this kind of adds up, and you have quite a bit more code lines, quite a bit more classes to maintain. So how does it work actually? Let's take a simple example, just text field and button on the screen and one click listener. Actually this should probably be written in lambda expressions because Vaadin supports lambdas today. It's just plain Java on the server side. So if you have Java 8 JDK running on the server side, you can use lambdas instead of inner classes. But this isn't like the traditional way of writing this. When this gets run on the server side and you browse to this application, what happens actually is that you download around 1.2 megs of CSS and HTML and JavaScript and so forth. Luckily you are not writing these yourself. And luckily this gets compressed down to around 130K or so after the reduction of the widget that you asked. So there's also one thing to note over there. This 130K, it only contains the implementation of those widgets. It doesn't know anything about your application. So if you think of it, you can think that this is a kind of terminal adapter that receives instructions from the server side. This same widget can render thousands and thousands of views from your application, and it would be still of the same size. When you're comparing this to GUID, and you have thousands of views in your application, that would add up quite a pile of JavaScript after the compilation. In Vaadin that would be 130K, or I think in more realistic application where you have more widgets than just text field and a button, it would be like 200 to 300K. So these get rendered on the screen, and when you do something over there, let's say you write your name and click a button, Ajax call gets sent over the wire to the server side. This is really tiny, it's around 200 bytes. It gets routed to your event listening code on the server side, so you get basically button click event. You can modify the UI as you wish. You could add a notification or change the component dynamically. And after that, Vaadin takes over, sends back the changes to the component tree, and only the changes that actually happen in there. They are not HTML, these are basically JSON encoded instructions on how to move widgets around. And this is really, really compact. So in this case, it would be like 200 bytes. And this is sent in the same Ajax call. Or if you are using WebSockets, that would go through the WebSockets. So that's how Vaadin works under the hood. I think the biggest thing on the server side development model is the development cycle and how fast it actually is to develop things. So let's try it out in practice. So we could create a new project. I'll just create the Vaadin 7 project. This is just a normal web project, so you can easily take your, let's say, Spring MVC project or whatever web project you have and add Vaadin over there. So let's call it, what should we call it? It should be GWT.create. And we can choose deploy on Tomcat or Google App Engine or basically any kind of Java server will do, or actually also portals will do. So let's create this project, and I tend to use shareable. So if you take a peek inside the project, can you see this by the way, in the back? Excellent. So if you take a peek inside the project, there is only one file, one Java file, that does two things. First of all, we publish a servlet that serves our application. It basically says that any requests to this URI should get routed to this Vaadin-based user interface. And the user interface is initialized by we create a layout, put a button inside the layout, and show something on the screen when we are actually running this layout. So let's try to run this. And we could use the Tomcat to run it. And actually we could use a real web browser to show it. So let's this one over there. Okay. So basically we just put a button on the screen, and when we click a button we add a label underneath it. So we can also start modifying our application. Let's say, thank you, just thanks. We save it and continue clicking it. I don't even have to reload the page, and it actually modifies the application on the fly. And this is really awesome for when you're actually building your application. You can modify the code and see it on the screen, and there is no like compilation or dev mode or super dev mode when you're doing this. But if you would be doing these changes on the client side parts of Vaadin, then you have to be using dev mode or super dev mode for it. So let's start programming something more interesting. So we could actually start from, let's say, from scratch. And we could start by, let's say we use the current Vaadin table. Let's see, we put a list of documents on the screen. Like this, and we could say use a doc. Save. Let's put this one on the layout as well. List. Okay, we can take a look how it looks like. It doesn't look like much because our list is empty over here. But we could bind this to a data source. And now we have to remember that we are running on the server side. So we can do crazy stuff like put it over there. Access the file system directly. This is not recommended, but you can do it. In real application, you probably would have like some kind of database, but it's easy to demo this way. So new file, and I have some docs on my temp directory, I guess. It is annoying. And we probably want to connect this list to this newly created data source. So let's see, like this. And let's go back to our application and reload it. We should have some docs over there. Maybe, let me see. Oh, it's an empty doc. So it works perfectly well. I thought I would have some docs over there. So let's see, I grab some docs. I think I should have some in some old Vaadin presentation. Docs.zip. Okay. Okay, now we are seeing our docs. So basically just a bunch of HTML files over here, take a lazy loader while I'm scrolling around. I can show some properties like size and last modifier and so forth. The next thing is that it would be cool to can actually show these documents on the screen. For that, let's add a simple event handling code over there. So we could have, let's start by having a label for showing those docs. New label. And it could be like empty first, and we want to use HTML for showing these, and let's put the label on the screen as well. Doc. And then we want to actually listen for selection events in the list, so we say list set selectable. So we want to be able to select something from there, and then we say list add value change listener new value change listener, and whenever something changes over there, we want to just put this file in this label. So we say doc set data source new text file, and what we want to show over there is the file that we selected from the list. So we get list get value like this. So let's see if that works. These are annoying. Maybe I should start the server to make JRoll happy. So now we have these documents over there. Oh, there is one thing missing actually. This kind of demonstrates that what is the interaction model of Vaadin. Now, everything that I wrote over there is on the server side. And what I'm doing over here is selecting on the client side. So events actually doesn't get sent to the server side automatically if I don't ask them to get sent. So I could say list set immediate true. So I instruct Vaadin that, hey, this is an event that I really would like to send to the server side immediately when I receive it. For some components like button, it's obvious, so button automatically sends the event to the server side. But for, let's say, table selection, we might want to collect a bunch of events and send these at once to the server side. So now I'm showing the text file below over here. And things like kind of optimizing this UI. Let's say I want to kind of long press my key over here. It doesn't actually send events now to the server side until I can release my finger from here. So that kind of optimizations are automated. Let's make it a bit nicer looking. It's still boring looking. So we could replace that with the, let's say, vertical split panel. And there is really powerful layouting mechanism in Vaadin. So we could say that instead of list being of the default size, so that would just look like. Oh yeah, this actually demonstrates that we actually are running on a real JVM, so we can put breakpoints in there and so forth. So I don't have a set margin for the split panel, so I should edit that and continue. So my split panel is over there. Oops, over there, and the table being of the default size doesn't actually follow the size. So I should probably say the table that it should follow the size given to it like this, and now I can kind of choose docs from there. I'll show one more thing over here. So things in Vaadin almost always are components. So when you are building your application, you are building new components. So let's build a new component. Let's see. we want to build a new editor component as a composite. So let's call it editor. And that's just a simple Java file defining a composite. The cool thing is that we can also go to design mode. So we can actually draw the component. We could put, let's say, tab seed over here, drag that around over here like this, and pin that down to corners, put let's see, rich text area over there and over here. We could stretch this a bit. No, not that one. Stretch this component. And also the same thing for rich text editor like this. And then we save and our component is done. We actually just edited the source code file. We could do this by hand, but sometimes it's more handy to do it with an editor. So we can start using this component. Let's just replace this label with our new editor component like this. And actually it doesn't compile because we miss one method over there. So let's create this one. So whenever property data source is changed for our new editor, we actually set that to our text area. And also for our rich text area. Like this. So now it should compile, it does, and let's see if it works. So now what we have over here is an editor. We can choose a document. These documents are on the disk as HTML files. We can actually start editing these. Let's say GWT.create. And we can also go to HTML mode. We should find this same GWT.create over here. I'm not going to be tracking that down. Anyways, the point is that these properties are kept in sync. So when I'm editing something in this rich text area, it gets edited also in text area. And this actually gets saved back to the disk. So if I choose another document and come back to here, it still remembers that it's GWT.create. So it actually sends also back to disk. So it's pretty automated when you're communicating with the Java with the data sources. Okay, let's move forwards. So what do you think about the development cycle? Okay. Yeah, it should be a bit like faster than demoed. Yeah, it's Shareable helps over there. So without Shareable, the same thing would be taking like 2 seconds for the class reloads. Now it kind of replaces those classes on the fly. If you would have like large application with a lot of classes and no Shareable, then it takes more. You're basically kind of replacing more classes over there. The third thing is embracing Java. So because we are running on the server side in real JVM, we can use any language to build UIs. Scala is pretty cool nowadays, and I've seen people using more and more Scala for building Vaadin UIs. Java 8 is pretty cool with lambdas, so it really helps if you can use lambdas to build your UI. And people can do crazy stuff like, I think the stupidest thing that I have seen was somebody building UI in COBOL. I think it was more like a practical joke, but it actually compiled and worked. So you can use COBOL to build Vaadin UIs. I can guess that the most interesting languages would be Scala and Ruby for building Vaadin UIs, in addition to Java. It runs basically on any web browser. You don't have to need any applets. That's pretty standard. You can run it anywhere in any kind of servlet or portlet container or Java EE server. If you're having a full Java EE server, there is full support for CDI events and injection and so forth. Most IDEs support Vaadin. So basically there are plugins for for Eclipse, IntelliJ and NetBeans, whichever you're using. By the way, who is using Eclipse? Wow. Who's using IDEA? Quite a few. NetBeans? No one. Yeah, I guess this is a bit biased because there is so good plugin for GUID in Eclipse, so it kind of drives people in Eclipse more. But IDEA is getting more and more popular nowadays. So, what's the relationship to GUID? In past, Vaadin was just using GUID as a rendering engine. Basically, we were rendering all the widgets on screen with GUID. Nowadays, we actually are kind of moving, or we have moved the whole copy of GUID inside Vaadin. So we have a separate fork of GUID inside Vaadin, and the reason being that we want to be able to kind of fix bugs in any part of Vaadin. Previously it was, hey, there's a bug in GWT, sorry, we cannot do anything about it. Nowadays we can actually fix that bug and do a new release. Of course, we want to push all those fixes back to the GUID as well, so everybody who's using GUID can use them, and we can keep these two guys in sync. But as a side effect, this makes Vaadin GUID compatible. So if you have, when you have a GUID application, you can basically take that application and replace GUID user jar with Vaadin client jar, and it should work right out of the box in Vaadin. Of course, there would be no benefit to that, but the good side is that then you can start using Vaadin parts as well. So you can start using push channel in your GUID application. You can start using this grid component that is coming out, and you can start building some of the views on the server side. So you can use the development model in Vaadin that I just demoed as a part of your application. Have the UIs that you already have on the client side and start adding server side UIs. So basically, the motivation for the server side UIs is productivity. It's really, really fast to build server side UIs. Motivation for the client side is that then you have full control over what's happening in your application, how the communication works. Quick architectural brief. You basically always have to build some kind of backend and some kind of UI in one application. This UI lives on the server side. Even if you are building a client-side application, you should have like really thin UI that just launches your client-side application. UI can be built out of ready-made UI components like buttons and trees and so forth. Each of these components, they have client-side version of it. So when you're building a server-side UI, as I just did, you are using those buttons and trees on the server side. These are just plain old Java classes. For each of these classes there is a client-side copy, and Vaadin keeps these two guys in sync. So when somebody clicks the button on the client side, you receive that event on the server side. When you change the caption of the button on the server side, this caption is sent back to the client side. There is theme on top of that, and you can also build UIs on the client side, but of course then you would have to have some kind of service on the server side to actually fetch data from. What is happening at the moment in Vaadin is that this is a quite old framework. We have been around since 2001 already, so it predates GUID with a large margin. And we have been supporting the same APIs for a long time. So we are quite enterprise in a way that we want to actually guarantee that when you are using Vaadin, that your application doesn't break in 1 or 2 or 3 years. But what we did, we released a totally new Vaadin version a year ago that modernized the whole framework quite a bit. So we added push channel, we added SAS compiler, we added support for building widgets in JavaScript, we copied the whole GUID inside Vaadin, and so forth. So there are many things that we renewed. there are actually so many features that it wouldn't make any sense to go through these. You can go to Vaadin.com/7 and there are a list of 67 or so new features in Vaadin 7. Some kind of favorites of mine. There is a full SAS compiler in Vaadin, built in Java. That was a crazy idea to kind of re-implement the whole SAS compiler, but we did it. And that kind of gives you such a powerful theming that Arthur just demoed in the keynote. So you have like high-level syntax on top of CSS, and it's super fast to compile new themes with that. You can basically take any JavaScript widget and add a server-side API for it. You don't even have to do a GWT compilation cycle. You can just start using those JavaScript widgets in your Vaadin applications. There is server push that detects whether your browser can do WebSockets or not. If it supports WebSockets, we use those. If it doesn't, then we actually use HTTP streaming for simulating WebSockets. So even if your application is targeting IE8, we can provide you reliable push mechanism. I don't know if who went to Leif's communication mechanism presentation, transfer mechanism presentation? Quite a few. So you probably heard about RPCs and states over there. Arthur will have a hybrid application presentation this afternoon where he kind of discusses how to combine server-side and client-side parts, and he will introduce the transport mechanism in Vaadin in more detail over there. So this brings quite a bit of kind of extra things that you can use for communicating between the client and the server if you're building things on the client side. So it's quite a bit more extensive than just GWT RPC. So how to get started with Vaadin? There are multiple ways. There are good tutorials online. Just go to vaadin.com/tutorial and try them out. If you are using Eclipse, as most of you are, just go to Marketplace and search for Vaadin and install Vaadin plugin. After that you can start building new Vaadin UIs. For idea guys, it's already installed for you if you are using the latest version. For NetBeans guys, we don't worry about these 3 guys. There is a plugin for them as well. It's not as good as IDEA or Eclipse plugin. There are good Maven archetypes for building new projects. There is a free book about Vaadin. It's 700 and some pages long, so it basically steps through all the features in Vaadin and kind of explains these to you. So the documentation is excellent. It's online as PDF, EPUB, HTML, but if you want to, there should be also some hard copies left at our Vaadin booth, so you can grab one for free. Is there a hook? Why are these guys giving this away for free? No, there is no hook, so it is fully Apache licensed. You can use it for anything for free. Our hook is that we would be there to serve you if you need any help with that. I know it's a bit stupid business model in a way that we have noticed that there are not that many problems in Vaadin, so. But luckily that the user base is growing really fast, so there is always somebody who wants to have a tutorial workshop or training or our guys to build a new widget for them. We don't know the exact number of developers. We are seeing something around 150,000 unique visitors on our developer portal each month. So we are just guessworking over here. But it's a sizable amount of developers that are using Vaadin all around the world. Today you have 3 options, 1:30. So there is this hybrid application presentation coming up. So if you want to combine client side and server side, that might be a good place to be, and also to kind of understand the communication mechanism a bit better. Then there is a brilliant theming workshop that basically walks through how to build themes for Vaadin, how to build responsive layouts. And if you want to have a small taste of that, Jouni, who will be giving this workshop, is actually giving a presentation right after this presentation. either this room or the next one about CSS. So if you want to learn more CSS and more about theming, that's a place to be. But also if you want to kind of try out Vaadin for the first time, hands-on, we have a Vaadin intro workshop, also starting 1:30, where you can actually build your first Vaadin application. So those are the options. And remember to rate this talk. Actually, not this talk, but this talk. All the slides are in Slideshare, so if you want to show these to your colleague. Any questions? We already have like 10 minutes of questions and we can have 5 minutes more. Yes?
I have 2 questions. The first one is, what is the version of GUID that Vaadin is using?
At the moment, we are using tip of the trunk, so it's somewhere between 2.5.1 and 2.6.0. It will be 2.6.0 really shortly. So just to kind of elaborate that a bit, our release cycle is a bit different than in GUID. We are basically doing major releases every 3 weeks, so we really want to push bug fixes out really fast. And GUID doesn't have such a fast release cycle, so we actually have our own version that has more fixes than the mainline GUID.
The second one is, some say that Vaadin is more adapted to intranet application more than internet application because it communicates, it has a lot of communication with the server side.
Somewhat true actually. So if you think about it, when user clicks a button in Vaadin application, in most cases actually goes to the server side and gets UI changes from there. The good part in that is that we are guaranteeing you that it only goes to server side once. In GUID application, you might like switch a view and you might do multiple calls to server side just to kind of fill in the data in all the different components. So in that respect, there is a limitation of at most one AJAX call to user interaction. At the same time, as you remember this set immediate call, you can set it false, and that way you can kind of collect all the changes and send these at once. Let's say fill in a whole form and send all the changes at once. So you don't have to go to server side every time. In practice, the communication is not the bottleneck in applications. What I have been seeing is that the bottleneck is most often the backend side, and if the backend is not the bottleneck, then on the UI layer, how much it uses memory, because we are storing the state on the server side. In practice, depending on your application, you can run something like from 5,000 to 15,000 concurrent users per front-end server. So it should be scalable enough for business purposes. It wouldn't be scalable enough for building the next Gmail. Whether that runs on intranet or internet, it doesn't matter too much. You can try out the demos at demo.vaadin.com and basically experience how fast the communication is, even over a network. And in this case, I shouldn't be recommending this because it's a conference network that is really not working, but all the demos that I run actually were probably running in Ireland in a data center over conference wireless LAN, so it's pretty responsive.
Thank you.
I guess we are out of time for questions, but we can chat more right after this session at our Vaadin booth. Thank you.